Far away from Earth, in an academy that floated high above a distant planet, students from every corner of the galaxy gathered to learn. The great hall was filled with creatures of many shapes and sizes, some with scales, some with wings, some glowing faintly with inner light. Their voices carried in different tones and languages, blending into a strange but beautiful sound of shared knowledge. In this place, young minds were trained not just in numbers and science, but in how to live together despite their differences. Yet, even here, not all students were treated the same. Among the rows of brilliant colors and alien forms sat a small group of humans. They were new to this world, newcomers to the galactic stage, and many of the other species watched them with mixed feelings. Some looked at them with simple curiosity, wondering what this fragile-looking species could bring to such a vast community. Others, however, carried doubt in their eyes, whispering quietly that humans were weak, unworthy, or too inexperienced to belong here. But the humans did not flinch. They sat tall, listening, learning, and quietly showing that they belonged. This was not just a classroom. It was a stage where respect would be tested. At the far end of the hall, in the last row where the light from the great ceiling lamps barely reached, sat a cub unlike the others. It was small in size compared to the older students, but its presence filled the space with tension. The cub belonged to a species feared across many systems, creatures known for their strength and wild instincts. Even at such a young age, its sharp eyes glowed with defiance, and its low growls rumbled whenever a teacher's voice grew stern. While the other students tried to focus on their lessons, their eyes often flicked nervously toward the back row, waiting for the cub's temper to flare. It shifted restlessly in its seat, claws tapping against the desk, tail twitching in irritation. The teachers, though skilled in many subjects, hesitated whenever they looked at it. They had been warned that this cub had a fiery temper, one that had broken more than a few lessons in the past. No one knew what might set it off. To many, it was not just a student, but a storm waiting to break loose. And yet, day after day, the cub was there, silent one moment, simmering with anger the next, a test for anyone brave enough to face it. The cub's restless presence turned every lesson into a test of nerves. Students from distant worlds, some covered in scales, others with feathers or shining shells, tried to keep their focus on the teacher's words, but their attention often strayed to the back row. The low rumble of the cub's growl was enough to make them uneasy, like a storm cloud waiting to break. They whispered quietly among themselves, their voices low and hurried, passing warnings from one to another. A few tried to sit farther away whenever possible, choosing seats near the front even if it meant being closer to the teacher's questions. None of them dared to meet the cub's eyes, for when its sharp gaze swept across the room, it carried the weight of a silent threat. The tension spread like an invisible chain, binding everyone in the room with fear of what might happen next. Some hoped the cub might simply grow tired and quiet down, while others prayed the class would end before its temper exploded. It was not just an ordinary student to them. It was a danger, and the question was not if it would lash out, but when. The teachers of the academy had faced many challenges before. They had trained students from dozens of species, each with their own tempers and habits, yet nothing compared to the cub in the back row. It was not that they lacked authority. They had rules, discipline systems, and methods passed down through generations. But whenever they tried to enforce order with the cub, their voices faltered. Their words bounced back like stones thrown against a wall. The cub simply ignored commands, its eyes burning with defiance, daring anyone to challenge it further. Some teachers tried gentle reasoning, others attempted stern warnings. But the results were always the same: growls, claws tapping against the desk, or the scrape of its chair dragged sharply across the floor. Each failed attempt left the teachers more hesitant, more unsure. Whispers began to spread even among the staff, quiet doubts about whether they were equipped to handle such a student. Some avoided calling on it during lessons, while others rushed through the class just to escape its presence. In the end, their training felt powerless, and their silence only made the cub's dominance grow stronger. It seemed no one had the answer, and the room remained on edge day after day. Amid the gathered teachers, where voices often trembled and eyes darted nervously toward the cub, there sat a human woman. She did not rush to speak, nor did she show fear like the others. Her manner was quiet, yet it carried an invisible strength that needed no display. She observed carefully, watching the cub's movements, its restless energy, its defiance that seemed to grow when others faltered. While the rest of the staff exchanged worried looks and whispered doubts, she remained steady, her posture relaxed but attentive. It was not that she ignored the tension. She felt it just as much as everyone else. But her calm stood apart, like still water while storms raged around. Many of the other teachers overlooked her, thinking of humans as newcomers, inexperienced and too simple to handle such matters. Yet there was something in her gaze, something unspoken, that hinted she saw more than just anger in the cub. She was not distracted by the noise or the fear in the room. Instead, she waited, patient, as though she knew there would come a moment when action was needed. And when it did, she would not hesitate. Her silence was not weakness, but readiness. The morning began with unease heavy in the air. Students filed into the hall, some glancing nervously toward the back row, already anticipating what might happen. The cub was there, but unlike the others who took their seats, it paced back and forth, claws dragging across the floor with sharp, grating sounds that made a few students flinch. Its tail lashed side to side, striking chairs as though daring anyone to come closer. A low growl rumbled in its chest, not loud enough to be an attack, but strong enough to remind everyone of the danger it carried. Teachers exchanged uneasy looks, their voices faltering as they tried to begin the lesson. Each attempt to call the cub to order was ignored, dismissed as though their words held no weight at all. The other students sat stiffly, their attention caught between the teacher and the restless figure prowling behind them. No one dared to whisper this time. Even breathing felt cautious, as though one wrong sound might draw the cub's fury. The room was trapped in waiting, the tension building with every step the cub took. It was clear to all that something would break soon, either control or chaos. The lesson began, but it never truly started. Words spoken by the teachers were swallowed up by the low growls echoing from the back. Every attempt to project calm was broken by the sharp scrape of chairs shoved aside and the dull thud of a desk being nudged out of place. Holographic screens flickered as the cub's movements disrupted their sensors, glowing images bending and stuttering as if even technology itself felt the weight of the unrest. Students tried to focus on the material, but their eyes kept drifting toward the cub, who seemed more interested in showing its defiance than learning. Each push against the desks carried a challenge, daring the teachers to confront it, daring the room to acknowledge its control. The order of the class was slipping, and everyone could feel it. Some students hunched over their work, pretending not to notice, while others sat frozen, waiting for what might happen next. The teachers exchanged tense glances, their voices losing strength with every interruption. It was not just a disruption anymore, it was dominance, the cub claiming the space as its own. And with every passing moment, the atmosphere grew heavier, pressing down on everyone present. Fear spread quietly through the room, growing heavier with every passing minute. A few alien students shifted in their seats, their bodies tense as if ready to bolt through the door the moment the cub's temper flared too far. Some clutched their learning tablets tightly, knuckles pale against glowing screens, while others lowered their heads, hoping to become invisible in the crowd. No one wanted to be the target of the cub's wrath. The sound of claws dragging against the floor made several students flinch, and the swish of its tail striking a chair caused nervous gasps. Yet not a single voice rose in protest. The cub's presence was like a storm hanging over them, unpredictable and dangerous. A few brave students glanced toward the teachers, waiting for someone to take control, but the hesitation of the staff only deepened their unease. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was strained, the kind that comes before something breaks. Every eye, whether looking directly or stealing cautious glances, was fixed on the restless cub. The lesson was forgotten. Knowledge had no place here. Fear ruled the room. It was clear to all. No one dared to confront the cub, not yet. While fear gripped the students and hesitation silenced the teachers, one figure remained steady, the human teacher. She did not shift in her seat or lower her gaze as others did. Instead, she kept her eyes on the cub, following its restless steps with quiet focus. There was no anger in her face, no fear either. only patience, as if she was studying more than just its behavior. Every flick of its tail, every scrape of its claws, every growl that vibrated through the air was noticed, measured, and understood. Where others saw only danger, she seemed to see a pattern, a struggle deeper than rage. Her calm presence stood out sharply against the tension of the room. Some students, stealing nervous glances, noticed her composure and wondered how she could remain so still. The cub, too, seemed aware of her gaze, though it did not yet understand it. She did not reach for authority in rules or loud commands. Her strength came from something quieter, something harder to shake. It was as if she was waiting for the right moment, a moment when fear and chaos could be turned into silence. Her watch was not passive, it was preparation. The moment came quietly, almost unnoticed at first. While others sat frozen, the human teacher rose from her chair with steady movements, not rushing, not hesitating. The scrape of her chair's legs against the floor was soft compared to the cub's noise, yet it carried a strange weight that drew every eye in the room. She did not shout, nor did she call for order. Instead, she simply shifted her chair forward, placing herself more firmly in the center of the room, where every student, and the cub, could see her. The action was small, almost ordinary, but in the tense atmosphere it felt powerful, like a line being drawn where none had dared before. The students watched in silence, holding their breath, waiting to see what would follow. The cub stopped mid-step, ears flicking at the sound of movement, and its sharp eyes locked on her. It had faced teachers who trembled, who looked away, who tried to command with fear or please. But this was different. She was not challenging with force, nor retreating into silence. She had made a decision without words, a choice to stand firm in her own way. And in that quiet act, the balance in the room began to shift. The hall seemed to grow quieter as the human teacher raised her hand, slow and steady, every movement deliberate. She did not wave or snap her fingers as some might have done, nor did she command with loud orders. Instead, she extended her arm and pointed with calm certainty to the floor right at her feet. The gesture was simple, almost too simple, yet its meaning could not be mistaken. She was not asking, she was not threatening. She was showing a place, a space that belonged to her, and she was silently telling the restless cub to claim it. The alien students held their breath, unsure if such a bold move would bring chaos or control. To them, the cub had been untouchable, defying every rule and rejecting every voice that tried to guide it. But this was different. The authority in her hand was not born of fear or anger, but of confidence, quiet and unshaken. Even the cub seemed caught off guard, its tail slowing, its growl softening as it looked at her hand, then at the spot on the floor. For the first time, it did not know whether to resist or obey. The power of silence hung heavy, and all waited for its choice. The entire hall seemed to stop breathing as the cub halted mid-step, its claws half raised, its tail suspended in the air. For so long it had been the one to control the space, storming through the rows, filling the air with its growls and defiance. Yet now, under the calm gaze of the human, it felt something it had not expected: uncertainty. The fierce light in its eyes flickered, not with weakness, but with hesitation, as though it was caught between instinct and an unfamiliar pull. The alien students sat frozen, too afraid to even whisper, their eyes darting between the cub and the woman who had dared to stand against it without a single word. The teachers from distant worlds leaned forward, their breaths shallow, wondering if this pause would explode into violence or shift into something they could not predict. The cub's chest rose and fell with sharp breaths, but its paws did not move. Instead, it stared at the human's hand, then at her steady eyes, as though searching for some hidden trick. But there was none, only stillness, only patience, only a presence that held more weight than any command. The silence stretched, heavy and unbroken, and the pause became the true test. The cub's body trembled with raw energy, its muscles coiled as if ready to spring forward at any second. Its claws scraped against the polished floor, leaving faint marks that echoed its struggle. Every part of its nature urged it to defy, to prove that it could not be controlled, not even by the strange human who dared to challenge it with silence. The room seemed to shrink around that tension, every pair of eyes watching as if the air itself might shatter. Yet within the cub, another force stirred, an unseen weight pressing down on its rage, whispering of restraint. It was not fear, at least not in the way the others felt fear of its growls and claws. It was something deeper, harder to name, born from the steady gaze and quiet strength of the woman before it. The cub's tail lashed once, its breath came faster, and its sharp eyes darted back and forth, seeking escape from the invisible bind it could not break. The students leaned closer without realizing, their own nerves stretched tight, waiting to see which way the storm would turn. The battle inside the cub raged silently, but all could feel it, as if the outcome might decide more than just that moment. The silence in the hall grew heavier as the cub's breathing slowed, its wild energy softening with each second. The fierce light in its eyes flickered, not gone, but changed into something quieter, almost questioning. Then, in a motion that stunned everyone watching, it lowered its head, ears flattening slightly as if conceding to a force greater than its own anger. Step by step, claws retracted, its heavy paws tapped against the floor with a rhythm that felt different, no longer defiant, but deliberate. The room was so quiet that every sound of its movement seemed louder than before. Teachers held their breath, classmates leaned forward, and still the human woman stood calm, unmoving, her hand no longer raised, her gaze steady as stone. Finally, the cub reached her side. Without hesitation, it curled into a circle at her feet, its tail wrapping close, its body sinking into a posture of surrender and trust. Gasps rippled through the class, disbelief washing over those who had expected claws and chaos. The woman did not smile nor gloat. She only rested her hand lightly near her chair, letting the moment stand for itself. Authority had not been taken by force, it had been freely given. Gasps rippled through the wide hall like a wave, echoing off the tall walls as if the room itself shared in the shock. Teachers who had spent weeks trying every method in their training stood frozen, their hands hanging uselessly at their sides. None of their commands, rules, or punishments had worked, yet the human had achieved what they could not, without a single harsh word. The students, who only moments ago had shrunk back in fear, now leaned forward, their wide eyes fixed on the unbelievable sight. Some whispered in disbelief. Others covered their mouths as if even speaking might break the fragile silence holding the moment together. The cub, once the storm that shook the room, now lay calmly at the woman's feet, its chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, its rage dissolved into quiet submission. It was as if the entire academy had been flipped upside down in the span of a heartbeat. The human teacher had not shouted, threatened, or fought. She had simply stood, pointed, and waited. That truth struck everyone watching with more force than any blow could. Respect, they realized, could not be demanded by power. It had to be earned by presence. The stillness in the room carried a weight no one could ignore. The cub had not been dragged, ordered, or punished into obedience. It had chosen, and that choice carried more meaning than any rule book ever written. Its body rested at the human's feet, not out of defeat, but in recognition of something deeper. The other students felt it too, though none could explain it in words. The human woman had not needed to raise her hand or voice. Her quiet strength had spoken louder than force. The teachers exchanged uneasy glances, their pride unsettled as they realized the truth. Respect could never be taken by fear, only earned by presence and dignity. The cub's surrender was not humiliation, but acknowledgement. It was as though the creature had recognized a leader, one who stood firm without aggression, one whose authority was steady as a mountain. Whispers spread through the hall, but none dared to laugh or mock. Instead, every being in the room carried the same thought in silence. What had just happened was not a victory of control, but a lesson. And the lesson was clear. True strength was not in power, but in the respect willingly given by others. By evening, the academy buzzed with whispers. Students from every corner carried the same story, repeating it with wide eyes and hushed voices. The human tamed the cub with nothing but a gesture. The words traveled faster than any official announcement. weaving their way through halls, study rooms, and dining areas. Each retelling carried a sense of awe, as if something impossible had taken place before their very eyes. For many, it was not the cub's surrender that amazed them, but the way it had been done, without anger, without force, without fear. Some students, once doubtful of humans, began to see them differently, wondering what kind of inner strength allowed such calm authority. Teachers, too, spoke in quiet tones, debating what this meant for their methods, their pride unsettled by the ease with which the human had succeeded where they had failed. Even those who hadn't witnessed it felt the weight of the tale, as though it carried a truth that needed no proof. The story was no longer about a cub or a classroom. It was about presence, discipline, and the unseen power that lay in quiet strength. A new respect for humanity had quietly taken root. The teachers sat together that evening, replaying the scene again and again in their minds. For years they had relied on strict rules, firm orders, and even fear to keep discipline in their classrooms. Yet the human had used none of these, and still the wild cub had listened. It made them question what true authority really was. Some admitted quietly that they had always thought humans were too soft, too fragile to lead in a place filled with powerful beings. But now they could not ignore what they had seen with their own eyes. Authority, they realized, was not about raising one's voice or forcing obedience. It was about certainty, about standing so firm that others felt it without a word. The human had shown them that calmness could be stronger than anger, and silence could speak louder than threats. It was a lesson none of their training manuals had ever taught. As they reflected, a strange respect grew within them, not just for the human woman, but for the kind she represented. That day, they began to understand that leadership was not measured by size, strength, or power, but by the quiet dignity one carried in every action. The students, who once whispered about humans as if they were weak and unimportant, now found themselves speaking in new tones. That single moment in the classroom changed how they looked at the quiet people from Earth. They had thought of humans as fragile, with no claws, no scales, no glowing powers like other species. Yet here was proof that strength did not always show on the outside. The cub, feared by many and impossible to control, had lowered itself without a fight in front of a human who had not even spoken a word. For young minds, this was more powerful than any lecture. They began to notice small things about the humans they once ignored. The patience in their work, the way they observed before acting, the calm way they handled problems. To them, it was no longer weakness, but a hidden strength, the kind that revealed itself when tested. Whispers of admiration spread, and soon the humans in the academy were treated with a respect they had never known before. The simple gesture of one teacher had shifted an entire perception, proving that humanity's quiet nature carried something deeper than anyone had realized. In time, that single act was remembered far beyond the walls of the academy. What seemed like a simple classroom incident became a story told in whispers across stations, ships, and worlds. Beings of many species repeated it as proof that humans carried something unseen yet powerful. The cub's obedience was not won by force or threat, but by calm presence and a clear gesture, a reminder that true strength does not always roar. For the academy, it became a turning point. Students walked past humans with new eyes, seeing not fragile bodies but steady spirits. Teachers, too, recalled the lesson, understanding that authority was not only in rules or discipline, but also in the way one carried themselves. Slowly, the legend grew beyond the academy and spread across the galaxy. It was said that humans did not need to dominate to be respected. They inspired respect by showing it first. That day, a mark was made, not with weapons or loud victories, but with quiet control and simple dignity. And so, humanity earned a place in memory, their strength etched in silence, forever proving that greatness could rise even from the smallest of gestures.